have a dream that one day all companies will compete not only to be the best in the world, but the best for the world. Others share this dream and have begun to turn the dream into a community. This community signed a declaration of interdependence and invited others to join them. Now more than 900 companies from 29 countries are turning our community into a global movement to redefine success in business. B corporations use the power of business to solve social and environmental problems. An eyewear company that disrupts an industry and serves the poor. A food service company that serves over 1 million meals to low-income public school students every week. A manufacturer that goes green and helps workers move from welfare to a career. An online bookseller that recycles used books and funds local libraries and global literacy. An outdoor apparel company that stewards the environment. An ice cream company that maintains its mission post-sale. B Corp is a certification that helps consumers identify these changemakers, and investors make money and make a difference. As a community, we are passing laws across the country, creating a new kind of company that serves society and shareholders. We are leading a global movement of people using business as a force for good. Join us. Be the change.
Good afternoon. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We have a really exciting plan for you to talk to some members of B corporations and learn a little bit more about B Lab and what B corporations do. We're thrilled to be here. We've had a really nice morning, and we're so excited that you took time out of your busy day to come and hear some of our speakers. So, as the video pointed out, certified B corporations are corporations that meet higher standards of social and environmental performance, transparency, and legal accountability. As of January 2014, there are more than 920 certified B corporations from over 60 countries, industries, and 29 countries. 20 states, including Delaware, have enacted benefit corporation legislation, and over 400 companies have adopted this new corporate form. More than 15,000 businesses are measuring what matters using B Lab's B Impact Assessment, and more than 100 investors and fund managers representing over $6 billion in assets across 30 countries are using B Analytics and GIRS ratings, or GIRS ratings, which we hope that Andrew here will help explain a little bit more. So this is Andrew Kassoy. He is the co-founder of B Lab. And he spent 16 years in the private equity business prior to founding B Lab. We also have with us Mike Brady, who is the president and CEO of Greyston. And we also have here Anjali Kumar, who is the general counselor at Warby Parker. I'm going to just start off by telling you a little bit more about their careers and how they came to either work at B Lab or work for B corporations, and then we have a series of questions that we've prepared to ask them, and we'll open up the floor for any of your questions at the end, if that's okay. So prior to founding B Lab, Andrew spent 16 years in the private equity business as a partner at MSD Real Estate Capital, which is an affiliate of MSD Capital, the $12 billion investment vehicle for Michael Dell, and as a managing director in Credit Suisse First Boston's private equity department. It's a mouthful. A founding partner of DLJ Real Estate Capital Partners and president of its international business. He's a board member of Echoing Green, an advisor to the NYU Reynolds Fellows Program, and a member of the U.S. Working Group of the G8 Social Impact Investing Task Force. He's a former board member of the Freelancers Union, and he hails from Boulder, Colorado, and graduated with distinction from Stanford, where he was a Truman Scholar and President's Award winner. He is a Henry Crown Fellow at the Aspen Institute. Andrew is now living in New York City with his wife, Margot, and two sons, 1-9 and 1-7. So that is quite a busy life. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're so excited to have you.
Thanks for having me.
Mike Brady is the president and CEO of Greyston Bakery, which is probably one of the awesomest bakeries ever.
That's enough.
So, great.
That's fine.
That's done.
That's all you need to know.
Founded the best bakery ever. So Greyston Bakery is actually building on its 30th year, and it is really and truly a heritage model for social enterprise. Michael served on the board of directors of the Greyston Foundation before being named president of the bakery in January of 2012. Prior to joining Greyston, he launched the first incubator in the country dedicated to organic food production and distribution. He's also a founding partner at BAO Food and Drink, a local food manufacturer in New York City. He's spent over 20 years in strategy and management positions, identifying and exploiting new business opportunities in high growth and transitional industries. Has a true passion for social entrepreneurism and is using the power of business to solve social issues that are fundamental to his work at Greyston. Michael's also a business advisor to the American Sustainable Business Council, helping to promote policies for a more sustainable economy. He received his MBA from the Wharton School of Business and lives in New York City with his wife and also 2 boys. Also
Trying that, yeah.
Many of you know Anjali Kumar. She is an idea acupuncturist, which means that she ignites ideas in others. And is accomplished.
Also a lawyer.
Yeah, it's also a lawyer.
Not as fun to say.
But we decided idea acupuncturist is her formal title. A designer, traveler, writer, and explorer. In more official terms, she's currently the general counsel and head of social innovation at Warby Parker, a transformative lifestyle brand that offers fabulous designer eyewear for those of us that are fashionable at a revolutionary price while making sure to lead a way for socially conscious business. Anjali used to be senior counsel at Google, New York. We miss her, where she was a commercial and product attorney on areas ranging from Google X to advertising technology to YouTube. She also curated the At Google speaker series, which is why I'm slightly nervous, bringing Googlers around the globe face to face with some of today's most prominent thinkers. Prior to being at Google, Anjali was general counsel at the Acumen Fund, an attorney at Sherman and Sterling, and led strategic planning at the Robin Hood Foundation. She's currently also an adjunct professor at Fordham University and served as a board member of the Issue Project Group. So there's more. She's working on a book called From Google to God, as well as a feature-length documentary based on the book, and in collaboration with Russell Simmons and Madeline Sackler. She is also the co-creator with Questlove of the forthcoming web series Questlove Presents Slightly Reserved with Anjali Kumar, which is awesome, which will appear on the Fast Company website. She's designed a handbag line featured in Vogue and on Sex and the City. She earned her BA in biomedical ethics from Brown University and her JD from Boston University School of Law, and she lives in New York City with her husband, Atul, and her daughter, Zia. So we are psyched to have you here. Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for inviting me back.
We could just
lunch.
please welcome them all. They can come out of the when you're dealing with such accomplished people, their bios are incredible. So thank you for hanging with us while we asked that.
Somebody should go online and verify that it
Yeah, we should live fact check those bios. All right, so I just want to start off talking a little bit more about, in depth about why B Corps are important and really opening up the discussion to really investigate why it is that we're here and focused on really promoting B corporations. I think let's start off with Andrew. Why is being a B Corp important to you as an individual? And why do you think it's important to consumers and the broader community?
So I'm going to give a slightly different answer than these two because I don't actually work at a B Corp. I work at B Lab, which is the nonprofit that's kind of helping to promote the B Corp movement. And so the personal version of that is there were 3 of us that started B Lab about 6.5 years ago. All of us came from the private sector. So you read my bio. I was a pretty uninteresting private equity investor doing pretty traditional investing. But my 2 partners have had much sexier careers. They started and built a a footwear and apparel business called And One. They made like really cool shoes and trash talking T-shirts that said, "If I give you $5, will you go home?" and stuff like that people wore on or less politically correct, "Your game's as ugly as your girlfriend," that people wore like on basketball courts. And anyway, they turned that into sort of a $250 million brand that outcompeted Nike on a lot of things. And they did it by having a lot of passion, but also by building a business that had a phenomenal culture. And so the three of us at the time that they were selling their business, they went through a experience of having a venture investor who didn't really care about much other than just making as much money as possible off of the business. And so the business got sold to the highest bidder, who was the bidder who cared the least about all the kind of the mission-driven things that they did as a business, all of the culture that they'd created, the really high standards for manufacturing they had in developing world markets, stuff like that, and saw all that stuff go away. And so for them, it was about trying to figure out how we can help businesses that care about something other than just making money. Entrepreneurs, people who want to make money but do good at the same time. And for me, it was the experience of being in sort of the traditional capital markets and seeing the way investors think more and more and more short term, which leads them to care only about making as much money in their investments in a business as quickly as they possibly can, and trying to externalize every other cost onto society, all the bad stuff, and thinking that there's got to be a different way to build a marketplace that supports businesses so that they actually create long-term value both for their shareholders and their stakeholders. So that's why I wanted to start B Lab. A lot more interesting is the entrepreneurs who've actually started and built the businesses themselves that are changing the way we all think about success in business.
That's great. And why do you think that this is the most effective model for social progress?
Well,
in terms of
it's not by itself, but I think what's important to say maybe is that we've come to a point in society where we're faced with some huge social and environmental challenges, and a lot of those challenges can't be solved simply through kind of traditional means like nonprofits and government. It's not that those aren't really important. They're necessary, but they're insufficient to solving some of our biggest challenges. And the reason for that is that they're inherently limited in their ability to scale, to attract capital, to attract talent. And business makes up 75 or 80% of GDP. So either business is going to be part of the problem or it's going to be part of the solution. And what we've seen is like this incredible, particularly amongst younger people, but this incredible outpouring of entrepreneurship, of people wanting to use business to create change. And so our feeling has been there are some impediments to that, most of which are just kind of like cultural. People just aren't used to thinking about business as a tool for positive social change. And that means that there's not like all the market infrastructure built up. There's not the information. There's no way to tell the difference between a good company and just good marketing. And companies know, you guys know this, companies know that consumers care and the people who come to work at their companies care a ton about how companies behave. And so more and more companies market themselves as being green or responsible or social or whatever it is. And it's hard to tell the difference. And so our sort of instinct originally was we need some organizing principles so that everybody knows the difference between a good company and good marketing, can identify those companies, and then support them, whether it's going to work at them or starting them or buying from them. And there's huge power in all of those companies then being able to get together and speak collectively with one voice.
That's a good point. And I think specifically the point around it being so easy to market yourself as being a responsible company. We've seen a huge surge in just marketing around sustainability and responsibility and renewal, and we're giving back to the community and part of our profits. And so in starting Greyston, Mike, why was it important for you to make sure that you were a B Corp versus any of the other sort of social programs you could have done or even marketing efforts you could have done to be good for the community?
Yeah. I need to be clear. Greyston was started 30 years ago by an amazing visionary entrepreneur named Bernie Glassman. And he started it with a concept of a business being able to support a community and giving back in an age 30 years ago when that language and a double bottom line was not even thought of. And I encourage everyone to look up Bernie. He has a long history as a leader in socially engaged Buddhism, and it's a great story, probably a little bit more than we can tell here. I joined 2 years ago, and I think one of the interesting tidbits is it's been so long that it's off my bio. I used to work at a company called Fast Search out of Norway. There may be people in this room that are familiar with it, but it eventually grew and was sold to Microsoft as their mindshare business. At that point, I began to look at social entrepreneurship and the importance of it, and the importance of our dollars going to companies that actually share values with my own values. And I had the good fortune of coming across Greyston, which is 25 minutes north on the MTA, and I said, this is a place I'd like to get involved with, and I find myself now leading it. It's been 2 years. At the same time, New York State had just about passed legislation to allow for benefit corporation status, and I had been exposed to it through other types of businesses, my other incubator that you had mentioned. It was at that point that I said, this is an opportunity for Greyston to take another leadership position. We had taken a leadership position 30 years ago. We need to take a leadership in New York State, and we need to be a voice that says the model must change. And there's a lot that goes into that. Andrew hit on a couple of the pieces, but it's the marketplace that we're all collectively a part of. And how can I support my fellow B Corps? How can they support me? How can we get the message out in meetings and opportunities like this to say, as consumers, you need to put your money and look towards whether it be B Corps or at least organizations that share your values. Because if you look at the way the economy is working today, it doesn't take you too long to think, hey, something's askew. And the business that accounts for that large portion of GDP is contributing to it. And if we don't look for ways to change it, we're going to continue to spiral down. And I don't mean to be, overly, depressing, but we really need to think about the fact that if we were all to fly to California, and those of you watching from the Bay Area, and got off a plane, and everyone there was living in poverty, and everyone there couldn't eat what they wanted for food, that's still 12 million people less than those people living under poverty in our country right now. 47 million people that don't know how they're going to afford their next meal. That seems like a problem for us. So at Greyston, we're a small bakery. To give you context, though, we're not sitting around baking cakes. One of the great organizations in this country is Ben & Jerry's. For 23 years, we've been providing brownies to Ben & Jerry's, 30,000 pounds a day, 12-hour shifts of hard work, of baking. Greyston's really model that we're known for is called open hiring. Anyone that comes to the front door of our bakery, we give a job to. No questions asked. And there needs to be more models like that. And that's what I hope through the Benefit Corporation movement, through conversations like this, through working with Andrew to think about employment, that a greater impact can be made just from the community that we're in Yonkers to a much broader community, a global community. So
That's incredible. That's incredible. As you've mentioned, you've been doing business since 1982. How do you feel, since Greyston's been in business, that the social enterprise landscape has changed?
There was none, right, 30 years ago. These visionaries, there's a handful of them, and they're companies that have survived, the Ben & Jerry's, the seventh generations, the Greystons, had an amazing vision, and they had to overcome naysayers left and right that said, why are you considering this? And then it still happens today. We just heard a conversation 10 minutes ago, like, business has a responsibility to the environment. They have a responsibility to the community they operate in. It needs to own up to that responsibility. And that's what these types of founders 30 years ago are doing. Everyone in this room and watching, and the people that are interested in it, are now taking note, which is great. What I hope in 30 years from now, the social enterprise term has now disappeared. It's run its cycle. And every organization would think back to say, what you weren't considering the environment with the way you ran your business. You weren't considering your employees' welfare or the welfare of the community when you ran your business. That just seems crazy. And that's what needs to change. It's in some time period soon.
Definitely. Well, companies such as yourselves and, getting into some of the work that Warby Parker is doing are really disrupting the way that business is done and even the way that consumers think about the way that business is done and should be done. Why do you think it's important to Warby Parker to be a benefit corporation?
So we are a certified B Lab corporation. We're actually a C Corp, and a Delaware C Corp, and we haven't changed our legal status. That option's only been available since the summertime when the legislation changed. And I think for us, a lot of the reason it was important was because of the community of like-minded folks that we found within the B Lab sort of family. The idea that you can do well and do good in the world is not necessarily a new one, but it's something that was really important for our founders to find that kind of shared vision. And I think when they met Andrew and the team over at B Lab, when they first started the company, it was like, oh, they get it. Like, this is what we're trying to do. And we're not crazy for having this idea that we can be this transformative lifestyle brand offering prescription eyewear for $95 and disrupt this industry. We can do that. And we can make a lot of money doing it, hopefully, and be really successful. But we can also have an impact in the world in a really meaningful way. And so having that shared value system with the folks at B Lab, and then also just the community of folks that they've brought around this movement has been really important, I think, to Warby.
That's great.
Yeah.
So how do you think that technology has played a role in Warby Parker's success, but also in just highlighting the work that Warby Parker is doing and giving back to the community?
Sure. I think it's been absolutely critical. Without technology, there would be no Warby Parker success, frankly, because I don't know if all of you are familiar with the story of Warby Parker, but just really briefly, the industry that we're out to disrupt is a really long-standing, pretty entrenched industry where there's one company essentially that owns the entire ecosystem from soup to nuts. So they own everything from the lifestyle only or the eyewear only brands, things like Persil or Oakley or Oliver Peoples. So they own all of those. They have exclusive licenses on a lot of the fashion brands that you might wear. So like your favorite, eyewear fashion brand, whether it's Prada or DKNY or Polo. They also own the distribution channels, so everything from a Pearl Vision to a Sunglass Hut. They own keeps going. Like they own the in-store kind of optical shops, so like Target Optical, Walmart, et cetera. And then they also own the second largest vision insurance plan in the States. So when you look at that entire ecosystem and realize that's all owned by one company, Luxottica, it's sort of not surprising why your glasses, which are kind of this 800-year-old piece of technology, costs more than your Android phone. Like, it starts becoming a little clearer why that might be the case, because these are ultimately, they're really cute. I think I look great in these glasses, but they are ultimately acetate and a couple, I know I look really good in them, right? Acetate, a couple of metal screws, and some glass. Like, it's really not that advanced technology that should be justifying that price point. So when Warby Parker set out to disrupt this massive industry, without access to those distribution channels, it would have been virtually impossible to actually do that. So without technology, without the Googles of the world, without the internet, there would have been no way to actually go direct to the consumer and do that. So I think from our perspective, sort of social innovation really starts with that, with creating a high quality product of prescription eyewear, something that people need in their lives to actually function at a competitive price point of what it should. It's not a low cost price point. It's really what glasses should cost. It's just that you've been overpaying for them for all this time. So here's what it should cost, and they also happen to be fashionable and all these other wonderful things. And on top of that, we also give back when we sell glasses. So that's sort of our tertiary messaging.
That's great. Thank you for that context. It's so important. I don't think many of us realize that, it's basically one corporation that manages every single aspect of the vision industry. Yeah. That's amazing. Yeah. Down to the insurance. Yeah. So, given that that's a lot of obstacle to face, what do you think specifically in terms of working with Google? One of the things that we've been discussing here over the last 2 quarters internally while promoting B Corps at Google is how many B corporations are actually using Google technology or Google apps in order to run their business. So I'm going to start with you and then kind of go down the line. How do you feel that specifically using Google technology has been useful to you? And what are some areas that you think would be more useful or or areas for development in terms of using technology or ways that Google could help more?
Ooh, my wish list? This is exciting.
Yeah.
I never had this access when I worked here, so that's kind of, I wish I had known I was going to be asked this question. I would have thought about it more. I would say in terms of my day-to-day, it's absolutely instrumental. We are on apps, like we use Gmail and Docs, and if they had switched us back to other products, I don't know what I would have done. I don't think I could have functioned after being at Google for 6 years and using all the apps. So it's absolutely part of my day-to-day. I don't feel like I left Google. I was joking about this with my colleagues earlier that I interact with Google every single day, constantly, so whether it's work or personally, so I don't feel like I ever left. So I think for our business, it's been absolutely part of the kind of the basis of how we function and how we run our business. I need to think about your second question.
We'll go right
I'm going to send you guys a list. I'm collecting ideas. Yeah. No, but I think it's been incredibly powerful, and just being searchable, and the ads certainly are a huge part of how we market to our consumers. So
that's great.
So keep doing
ads.
What you're doing.
Okay. So, obviously Warby Parker is a very different environment than Greyston. How have you been able to leverage technology to help promote the history of Greyston and what you're doing now? And specifically, are there any sort of ways that some of the apps that we have running around can help?
Yeah, I think it's probably better or easier to answer it as what the challenges are for us. And, the challenge ties to a lot of what Andrew was talking about, but the where Greyston will stand out amongst our peers in social enterprise and leading the way is through more transparency and more accountability and access to information, which are all things that Google is excellent at providing. So Andrew mentioned the impact study and the impact analysis. We do quite well on that, helping people to understand how we do well and why, and what they can do at their own businesses to copy what Greyston has done, or to leverage pieces of what Greyston has done, or to understand parts of Greyston. And it's somewhat self-fulfilling, of course, because then you'll learn about Greyston, and by the way, online you can buy some delicious brownies. And that's why Greyston is really an interesting place, because we have a product that most people like. And the keywords around brownies are more than I care to spend. But some keywords around social entrepreneurship, mission, open hiring, alleviation of poverty are more available to me. So there's a lot of interest on my part, and I think around what Google can provide around how do I market that? How do I get people to be aware of Greyston? How do more people come in contact with us? So that's on one end on the business, and then the other end is I work with a population of folks that it's very hard for me prior to working with them, and I might suggest, although I don't want to paint with a broad brush, that many of people in the audience are watching can't appreciate the challenges of the lifestyle that people that work at Greyston or come through the Greyston system have to deal with. And they can't afford a phone, but they need a phone. And they can't afford a data system, unlimited data, but they want it, right? I can't text my workers and let them know that we're down because we had a snowstorm or something, because they don't want to have to incur that charge. Tools to allow me to have access and work with a low-income population that are affordable and become ubiquitous and are easily accessible are critical. And they're often not thought of because there isn't money there. And that's a problem. Yeah. That's a problem.
And I think, as you started to say, some of the things that you do, like your open hire policy, those are all part of your model and your approach towards the way that you want to run Greyston. Do you think that being a B corporation presents unique challenges that non-B Corps don't face? And if so, what are they for Greyston currently?
I don't think there are unique challenges. I mean, the work that comes up, obviously, there's some reporting requirements, there's some elements to being a B Corp, but these are things that I believe a business should do, and that's my value as the leader of Greyston now. But I don't frankly understand other leaders that don't appreciate at least bringing elements of that to their business. It's very easy for everyone in this room to think about, okay, I'm buying this product, and as a business, I'm sourcing office supplies, let's say. Why wouldn't I source those from an organization that I know shares my values and is treating the environment properly? It's just it's just a small one piece of your business to do that. Right. Reporting on that in my benefit corporation report is not a burden. And the ROI on this, another challenge, but I think the long-term ROI on this, and Ben & Jerry's is the same way, and Ben & Jerry's is owned by Unilever. They are the same way. This population, the millennials, will be buying from companies based on these values.
Great.
So we'll have a competitive advantage by doing this, and leaders that don't see that are short-sighted and have short-termism as one of their biggest issues, and I'm sure Andrew can go into that, but I don't see any burden from benefit being a B Lab, B Corp, or doing our benefit corporation status.
I see you agreeing on.
Yeah, I know. I think it's absolutely true. I think if anything, it helps. The process is so rigorous to actually be certified as a B Lab. Right. It's not like just you fill out a form and then you're certified. It really is quite a rigorous auditing process, for lack of a better word, and that. We were already doing those things, and it's what we want to do, but in a way it sort of highlights best practices for our company, right? So it might point out things that we're like, oh, we didn't think of that, like that's a great idea, and that's a way for us to be more sustainable, or for us to push a little bit on that issue, or as we start having damaged frames, what do we do with them? We should think about recycling them and coming up with an interesting plan around that, and it just sort of helps test our thinking and push us to do more, but it's things that are already within the company ethos and the DNA of Warby Parker, and I think of so many companies that are B Labs or not, maybe they're not certified, but they share that sort of just desire to do good in the world, or to not do more harm in the world, Right. So I don't think of it as burdensome either. I think of it as very much just helping us stay on our toes, I guess.
It's wonderful. And I think just to kind of transition over to Andrew, Anjali mentioned the certification process and how rigorous that vetting process is and the auditing process is. Maybe you can talk to us a little bit about, how you find companies and how they find you, and what the auditing process is like. Yep.
So to be clear, like B Lab is this nonprofit. We run a certification, and the brand of the certification is called a B Corp. It's a little bit like if fair trade certification. B Corp is that, but for whole companies. And so for a company to get certified as a B Corp, it has to do two things. One, it has to meet a minimum set of social and environmental performance standards. So we created a rating system, which we can get to sort of the technology of that, because there's a bunch of really great opportunities there. But we basically built a rating system that measures the impact of a business on all of its stakeholders, not just its shareholders, but the community, the environment, its workers, its consumers, its supply chain, all that kind of stuff. The second thing is that the company makes a commitment to expand who it considers when it makes decisions beyond just considering the value for that particular decision on its shareholders, but to consider all of its stakeholders when it makes decisions. And those two things together allow the company to get certified as a B Corporation and join this community of like-minded companies, and then together to speak with collective voice. It's hard to get certified. Like, you have to do real work, as Anjali said, to go through that process. And part of it for every company is a learning experience. Like, as good as lots of companies are, whether it's these two or Patagonia or Ben & Jerry's, they all, when they go through that process, realize like there are things that they've been focused on that they do great, and there are lots of other places where they fall down. And so part of that experience of going through the certification process is meant to also like help everybody sort of meet them where they are, and then help lift all boats. And one of the interesting things that's happened as a result of that is there are now 15,000 companies that are using that tool that they've used to get certified as B Corps. There are 15,000 companies who have just gone online and started to use that tool in order to measure their own social and environmental impact and improve it. They might not even be ready to become B Corps. They might not be quite good enough yet, or they might be good enough but just say, you know what, we don't need to wear it on our sleeve. We really just want to use it as an internal tool. But more and more companies are doing that, and that's a huge opportunity to affect through their leadership and their transparency. It's a huge opportunity for them to inspire thousands and eventually hundreds of thousands of businesses to measure and improve their impact in the world. Google could go through that B impact assessment and probably learn some great stuff. You'd probably see some things that the company does incredibly well and find some other things that would be a great learning experience for the company to consider as it continues to scale. That's what's involved in becoming a B Corp. One of the things I think that's sort of important to say is when people like Greyston were doing this, started thinking about this idea 30 years ago of using business as a force for good, they were like wandering around in the wilderness. There were only a few of them. And they were pretty out there in terms of thinking about that. They were like in your classic kind of model of disruptive technology. They were like mostly dismissed as, like, oh, that's cute. Because they just weren't that many. And Mike's downplaying like the impact, the actual impact of what that business has done over 30 years, not just in Yonkers, New York, in taking people who are coming out of prison and turning their lives around by giving them jobs and training them and then sending them off to have real careers, but also the repetition of that model by other people who've been totally inspired by it all over the world, changing the way they think about work. 30 years later, here we are, and there are more and more mainstream businesses who've seen that and recognize that they can do business and do well while having a huge positive impact and doing something like in line with their values. And so Anjali's also played down like the impact of Warby Parker is not just on their practices and like things like a new recycling plan for glasses, or how they treat their own workers, or how they think about making life a hell of a lot better for consumers than it has been by making glasses cost $400 less. But it's also that every time they sell a pair of glasses, an organization in the developing world gets a pair of glasses to start a business where they sell those glasses to people who have, who could otherwise never afford a pair of glasses. And so they're changing economies throughout the developing world through those partnerships, what they're giving away. So and that's a mainstream business that's got, I don't know how much, but let's say like $100 million of venture capital money from venture capital funds that you've all heard of. So they're not running like a little a cute little thing. They're at that next stage that's beyond like people dismissing, but people actually being threatened because they're taking on, through a totally mainstream, quickly scaling business, they're taking on like the accepted order of how business is done. That's pretty threatening. And I think that sorry to go on, but I do think there's a ton of power then in them having like a family to lean on in doing that. That can tell those stories, and that's part of what the B Corp community is all about. Some point, another 5 or 10 or 25 years from now, that'll just be how business is done. All businesses will be competing to be best for the world, not just best in the world.
That's excellent. You speak, and I have to take a moment to absorb what you said because it's so impactful. It's bigger, I think, than most of us take time to really focus on. What are some ways that you feel? We were talking a little bit before the talk started about privilege, and how we're not even aware of just how where we're born or where we work gives us privilege. Sometimes we just don't take the time to think about it. Working at a place like Google, where we're surrounded by so much beauty and food, and we don't think about hunger. On a daily basis. I know it's not necessarily at the forefront of my mind as I'm packing by a micro kitchen stocked with food. What are some ways that you think young people such as ourselves that work at companies like Google can contribute to the B Corporation community, to B Lab, to B corporations, small businesses, or even to just promote knowledge around the community? And I'll start with Anjali.
Oh, sure. I think there's a lot of ways. I think starting with being a conscious consumer, that's always a great place to start. That's a really easy way to start. Voting with your dollars and sort of, spending money at companies that share that value system, if that's something that you hold dear. And I would think an audience full of Googlers, there's a reason that you're here, and it's beyond just the free food. It's really because of the core value system of this company. It's certainly why I was here and why I was really proud to be here for so long. So I think starting with that is a great way. I think, so I was thinking a little bit more about your question about what I would want from Googlers and what my ask would be. And it's not really a technology ask, it's more like a help me solve this problem ask, which is, you think about the number of people in the world that don't have access to glasses. It's 1 billion people, right? That's like a full 15% of the world's population that does not have access to prescription eyewear that need it. That's a staggering statistic, right? And that's a distribution challenge. If we could actually get glasses into the hands of all those people who need it, they could increase their earning potential by 20%. I mean, what a low-cost poverty alleviation tool. Like, we don't need to give them information. We don't need to give them all this other stuff. We can, but let's start with glasses. Like, it's a really simple tool to help people change their lives in a really meaningful way. And again, it's a distribution problem. I can't get glasses into all these folks' hands because I can't get to them. Help me figure that out. That would be amazing. Like, let's get glasses to everybody. So if somebody, here wants to help me think about those problems, that would be amazing, and help me find those partners of how we do this in a responsible way, in a sustainable way, not just, in pure charity and just giving them away and disrupting local economies and businesses, but really creating a sustainable solution to that problem. That would be incredible. And so I think that's sort of my big ask, but in a smaller way, I think it's just start with where you spend your money.
That's great.
Could I add something real quickly?
Yes, please. Yes,
I
please.
think buying with $1 is incredibly important. Where you spend your money. Also, we have such access to information and policies that are out there that grassroots movements now can have an incredible impact. Yeah. Think about how our government is operating and how things are passing in your state and your local governments. And I have in the back of my mind the Minimum Wage Act. Form an opinion on that. And when you have an opinion, go out and speak about it and try to get those things moved forward to support those that need help from others that perhaps are privileged enough to have opportunities to work at an amazing place like this after all your hard work. But
thank you. That's a good point. Please.
So first of all, that blondie is probably one of the best things I've ever had. So thank you so much.
Eat more brownies. That's another good thing.
I will. But I'm glad that you brought up something like the Minimum Wage Act, because I wanted to ask for B Corps, what is the stance when it comes to dabbling in kind of the public policy realm? And how do you kind of constrain yourself, or what is the most effective model that you've found so far?
Great question. So I think it's funny, like, entrepreneurs run from public policy and government as fast as they possibly can. And so it's always this interesting struggle of this huge community of entrepreneurs who are running these inspiring businesses. And, like it or not, business is affected in all kinds of ways by public policy. And so there has to be some engagement there. And so a lot of times they look to us to try to help play that role, along with there are some other organizations that are engaged in this in kind of like the sustainable business space and social entrepreneurship. What the view we've taken is, we don't want to be like a political player, because we don't think this idea of using business as a force for good is a left or a right kind of idea. I mean, if you're a liberal, you can get behind the idea that we need business to address a lot of the problems that we have, because business creates a lot of externalities. If you're a free market conservative, you can get behind the idea that, like, what better tool than business and free markets to solve some of our biggest challenges? So this is not political. And so the approach we've tried to take to public policy has been all about enabling. Like, let's do everything we can to level the playing field, to make sure that businesses that actually care about creating impact have the same ability to compete. So we've gotten legislation passed in 20 states that's actually created this corporate form called a benefit corp. It's basically a B Corp, a legal version of a B Corp. And the reason for doing that was because there was a huge impediment to businesses being able to scale, which was that the law says corporate law says that a business's obligation is to maximize value for its shareholders. Well, if that's true, then it's really hard for a business to choose to consider other things. It's like actual legal liability for the directors. And so on the public policy front, we've tried to attack issues like that, where it's not about politics, it's about enabling. I think there are some great opportunities to think about like how you tax companies that are creating measurable, quantifiable benefit for society, not just for their shareholders, or how you tax the investment in those businesses. That doesn't have to be a political issue on one side of the aisle or the other, but where we can support these kinds of businesses and incentivize more of them to solve big problems.
Great, that's a great question. Thank you. You have a question?
I think, Andy, you might have touched upon some of what I was going to ask anyways, but it seems like I was wondering if they're publicly traded companies that are B Corps, and the reason I'm asking is it seems there's a natural tension between the shareholders wanting to maximize profits and then the company wanting to meet the B Corp standards might have to give up some profits to get social and environmental changes, and we talk about impact and getting large players to adopt. So have you sensed this tension, and what are some of the things you're doing to bridge that gap?
Great question. So this is, and I mean, I think Anjali can obviously speak about this a lot because she works at a company that's scaling and doing really well, even while keeping all these things in mind. There's no question there's a tension there, and that said, there's no evidence that companies that consider their stakeholders do worse, particularly over the long term. And there are some studies that show actually that they do better, and it makes sense. They retain talent better. They avoid ridiculous risks that they shouldn't be taking that are irresponsible because they're more transparent. They are able to create more loyalty with their consumers and their supply chains. So they do a lot of things that allow them to create maybe more value over the long term. So I think that's a really important thing. That said, there's a lot of education to do of investors, particularly in the public markets, on that issue. And just like one thing just about technology that I think is important to say on this point, we have a ton of data, but we're running a nonprofit and we are certainly not, we're not data geeks. We don't know anything about big data. And one of the things that we could really use help with is thinking about how to use all of the data that we collect from these 15,000 companies, along with data that's out there on other companies, to start to make that case in a much more powerful way. So if you're like a big data engineer kind of a person and wanted to spend some time helping us try to figure that out, like that's one of the most important things if we want long-term growth here. The last thing I would say on that front is some public company someday is going to become a B Corp. It'll happen. So maybe it ought to be Google.
Nice.
That's a really good point. I mean, it's really
out there.
That's a good, get it in, grow the idea. Thank you guys so much for coming. We know that you're incredibly busy, and we really appreciate all of the information that you shared with us and all of the work that you do. It's been an absolute honor to have you here. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for coming.